Welcome to Bible 325. I am your professor, Shannon Cockrell, and I am so glad you joined us here at Austin Bible Institute, where we are training you to make a difference in the world. This video, we're going to look at a topic that is crucial to Christianity, is crucial to our salvation. It's a topic that I believe should be studied often to refresh ourselves, to remind ourselves of this magnanimous event. We're going to look at the rejection and suffering of Jesus. So if you want to pause the video and download the notes, we will look at the rejection, crucifixion, resurrection of Jesus Christ. We're in Matthew chapter 16. So if you want to go ahead and grab your Bibles, open it up, read that chapter in your spare time, or now if you like to pause the video. But we're going to look at a crucial event here when Jesus is teaching his disciples. He's foretelling of his death, something that they didn't quite understand. The disciples didn't understand the death of Jesus. They thought that as Messiah he would come and overthrow the Roman Empire by force and military might. But instead, Jesus is born as a lamb, as an animal to be sacrificed in a manger, in a feeding trough, because he is the bread of life, John 6:35. But when we look at the resurrection of Jesus, the rejection of Christ, and his suffering, his passion, we see that it was an Old Testament prophecy. Everything in the life of Christ was prophesied, and it shows the fulfillment of it. Matthew goes to great lengths at recording where it was in Isaiah, Joel. He talks over and over again, it is written, it is written, it is written. Christ came to fulfill everything that was prophesied about him, which shows us that we can trust this book. It is dependable. It is reliable. It is essential for our salvation. Everything in this book you can trust. You can trust. So Jesus in the Old Testament was predicted as the suffering servant, or Messiah. He's the servant, the suffering servant, the one who willingly gives his life for the master. Jesus was predicted as the Messiah. The Hebrews, the Messiah was someone who would come and regather Israel and bring them back as a nation, and release them into freedom. This is who the Messiah was. And you read a lot about this suffering servant in the book of Isaiah, the latter half of Isaiah chapters 40 through 66. If you will take the time to read those, you will see how the Messiah is predicted and what he was predicted to do. So before, now if you want to go ahead and pause, we can go ahead and pause and read Isaiah 52 and 53. I would just read a brief passage to us. Isaiah 50 verse 6. Listen to the prophecy here. I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who poured out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. So here we see the crucifixion. Leading up to the crucifixion is predicted that the servant, the Messiah, would go through this. If you look at Isaiah excuse me, 52, Isaiah 52, Isaiah 53. He's suffering, but he's suffering for a purpose. He's suffering so that we can be reconciled to God. He's suffering to fulfill the prophecies given over his life. Isaiah 53. Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? The arm of the Lord is Christ. He had no beauty or majesty. He wasn't good to look at. This is not what made him the Messiah. He was despised, rejected by man, a man of suffering, familiar with pain. Like one whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain. He bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. I would take out that part and put my name. He was pierced for Shannon Cockrell's transgressions. He was crushed for Shannon Cockrell's iniquities. Make it personal. Salvation is personal. Believing that Jesus died is history. Believing that Jesus died for you is salvation. Salvation is personal. He was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. And then he goes on to talk about how we are like sheep. So, over and over again, I just read a few passages, but over and over again, in the Old Testament, and then we get to the New, where Jesus is predicting his death. Now, this is hard on the disciples, because they have been following him for 3.5 years. They've given up everything to follow him, to be his disciples, to be his learners, his apprentices. And so now they find themselves hearing something that doesn't match who they thought the Messiah should be. So, Matthew 16, verse 21. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, prophecy, destiny, and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Then it goes on. Whoever wants to be my disciple, highlight these verses, underline these verses, circle these verses. Good stuff. Take up the cross, follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? So you need to understand, no, it is not the amount of Bibles you have, how many degrees you have, how many years you spent. What matters is you get in this book, you obey this book. This is again where the will of God is found. This is the bread from heaven. So now we get to Matthew 16. Jesus is, telling them to, who do men say that I am? And Peter gives this great revelation of Christ. But here, we find and we have the prediction of the passion, bearing the cross. This is Jesus' first prediction of his Passover. So we have the prediction of the passion, the bearing of the cross. After Jesus' first prediction of his suffering, his passion, what he came to do, Peter took him aside. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke Jesus. Jesus' stern response at Peter shows that God was attempting to use Peter's logic to get it out the way, to show that everything is erroneous if it falls short of the cross. Christians, we have t-shirts, necklaces, just about anything you can imagine that says wake up the cross. So Christians, we have to do something to get people to understand the magnitude of the command, take up your cross. It's your responsibility. A man condemned to crucifixion would go throughout the marketplace carrying the horizontal beam of the cross to the site, to Golgotha. The crowd would be cheering and cursing and doing all this as he is stumbling to his death. You see, for some Christians, a lot of Christians, the cross represents a dark and a danger to which we expose ourselves because of the commitment to Christ. So for Christians, the cross represents a risk or danger in which we expose ourselves because of our commitment to Christ. We're exhibiting that we belong to him. We have the marks. So taking up the cross is a decision that you and I personally have to make. No one can make this decision for you. Only you can make this decision. It's to take up the cross and move forward. God is going to give us opportunities to share our faith. God is going to open doors. God is going to do this. Matthew 16:24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciples first must deny himself. Deny himself. So when we look at the word for deny in the original language, it is the word aparniomai. Aparniomai means to utterly deny. Deny yourself, and that's the hardest thing for us, is to deny ourselves, to deny the wants of the flesh, the wants of the cravings. We deny ourselves, we utterly deny, we disown. And then he says, follow me, present tense. To be in the same way with, to accompany. This is what is behind the meaning of that word. Following Christ should be becoming more like Christ, even if it means dying. And then we get to Mark chapter 8. The storm is rising, it's crashing, but Jesus is asleep on the boat. And then he comes to the front. Mark 8:34. Then he called the disciples to him along with he called the crowd along with his disciples. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up the cross. Luke 9:23. Then Jesus said to them all, whoever wants to be perfect, Luke 9:23, whoever wants to be king is a chance that Jesus was a king, but he never had a royal crown. He took a crown of thorns. How can we deny Christ? Think about that. How can we deny Christ? Well, we deny him when our actions are not lined up with his word. We deny him. We disown him when we speak falsely about something. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. We keep pressing on to the light. He's the light shining on our light, but he's also the light giving us direction and where to go. So following Christ is not cheap, is not for the faint of heart. Brother and sister, I plead with you to make sure that you are right with God. Make sure that everything is right. Make sure that you have taken his security and become accustomed to it. Understanding that following Christ means we should be more like Christ. That's the goal. That should be the goal of every theology class you take. Is that everything I'm doing, every book I study, every Bible passage I read, my goal is to come back. My goal is to go back. My goal is to become just like Matthew. We wrap it up. Jesus says, if anyone wants to be my disciple, deny yourself. Take up the cross. Denying self, that's hard to do. But we have to deny ourselves. Unite. So remember, take up your cross at once. No jibber-jabbing around. We have to remember that the nurses have a lot of stress on them. The bereavement coordinator, the chaplain. We all have various So we're going to look at more what it means to deny Jesus in future lessons. What it means to disown him. He said, if you disown me here, you've already been disowned in heaven. So every morning I get up, I say, God, make me able, make me willing to Chad and to be with the people. Take up your cross. Follow Jesus. Man may fail you, man will fail you, but Jesus and Jesus alone, no, never. So, as you study your lessons, make sure everything you do, every paper you type, every community blog you join in, make sure everything is done toward the goal of becoming more like Jesus Christ. God bless you.